Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. I want to talk to you in this podcast about something that is deeply disconcerting to me and something that is filling our headlines right now, something you might not understand given that, we just don't tend to specialize in America in Middle East affairs. If you have been watching the news, though, you have heard that the president of Turkey, Recep Erdoğan, has actually cajoled the Supreme Court of Turkey into allowing a building called Hagia Sophia to be reverted to use as a mosque. Now, what I've just said doesn't land heavily on most Americans, but let me back up. Let me give you a little history. Let me tell you what's happened here. And then perhaps you'll understand the power of what's going on with this NATO ally, the nation of Turkey. In the 6th century A.D., a Holy Roman Emperor named Justinian decided to build a massive cathedral to Christianity. It was massive. It was a brilliant architectural design. It used amazing architectural features that were relatively new. It was the largest indoor span until the Houston Astrodome, built in 1963. The largest indoor span. That's how advanced it was. That's how amazing it was. You might have buildings of equal size, but they would not have had, first of all, the grandeur, and second of all, the magnificent indoor span. That means a span without pillars in the middle of it, holding it aloft. The largest indoor span until the Houston Astrodome in 1963. Pretty stunning. It was so powerful, it was so magnificent, the worship there was so glorious, that in 900, emissaries from the land of Rus, early Russia, emissaries from the land of Rus went there on a mission to investigate religion. And they went to Hagia Sophia and they attended the Christian worship there. And when they returned to Rus to report back to their king, they literally said that when they were in that place, they did not know whether they were in heaven or on earth. They did not know whether or not they had been caught up to heaven. So glorious was the worship that was going on there. And the land of Rus, so I won't tell you the whole story now for the sake of time, the land of Rus became Christian as a result. So such glorious Christian worship was going on at Hagia Sophia in Constantinople that the land of Rus, later Russia, became Christian because of what those emissaries had seen there. It was pretty stunning. Well, it continued to be a Christian icon. It continued to be a place of Christian pilgrimage. We went into World War I, as you know. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. A man by the name of Kemal Ataturk became the ruler of Turkey, and he decided that this magnificent building should be open to all, should be a symbol to all of religious unity. And so he decided to make it into a museum. And that's pretty much what it's been ever since. He did that in 1934, and that has pretty much continued. Well, what is happening now in Turkey is that Recep Erdoğan, the ruler of that nation, is definitely an Islamist and an extremist. He is a man who has made speeches in recent years about retaking Jerusalem in a jihad. And so he cajoled the Supreme Court of Turkey, and the Supreme Court established that it was allowable for Hagia Sophia to be made into a mosque. So this Christian symbol, this Christian building, lasting for generations, lasting for centuries, that has been revered for its architecture and also much loved as a symbol of religious liberty, religious unity, freedom of religion in countries, is now being reverted to a mosque. And by the way, when Recep Erdoğan said that he was going to do that, he made the announcement in Arabic. So he is clearly playing to the Muslim right, the Islamic right in Europe, in the Middle East. He is clearly taking this country called Turkey, which is supposed to be a U.S. ally and a member of NATO, in an extremist direction. He is clearly leading the nation as an Islamist. And we all know, those of us who track these trends, that there have been Christians arrested and other things happen, churches closed, religious persecution. Recep Erdoğan, without question, is turning Turkey backwards in terms of the history of Turkey and turning the country into a Turkish stronghold. I want to say again, we have air bases there in Turkey, in Sirlic. We have embassies there. This is a partner of ours. We have their officers coming to our officer training schools here in the United States. This is a man who has faked coups and killed enemies and done horrible things. And by the way, even as we speak, he is engaged in using bombing runs against the PKK, Turkish guerrillas, who have risen up against him, and he is killing Kurds in Iraq with these bombing raids under the guise of course, taking out PKK. Now, this is some of the senselessness that goes on in foreign policy. This is what often happens in the world. You have people saying, hey, NATO's a great ally, and the leaders shake hands, and they toast each other at banquets, and they march, and they have joint exercises militarily, and members of NATO go to West Point and the Naval Academy, etc., etc., etc. The fact is that what's actually going on in Turkey is a reversion to an extremist version of Islam. Recep Erdoğan is an Islamist in the extreme form. He would take out Israel. He would oppose the U.S. He would end the U.S.'s connection. He has worked closely with Putin. Putin has always wanted to have, the Russian Empire has always wanted to have control of Turkey. That's a long-standing battle, long-standing tensions. And so now this building, I grant you that some of you are going, what's the big deal about a building? Well, it's a huge symbol with great history, founded as a church. And even even Kemal Ataturk, the hero of the as Turkey emerged from the Ottoman years after World War I, even he didn't turn it Islamic. He tried to turn it to a secular purpose because he realized that one of the best things for Turkey was not to be an Islamic stronghold. And now Recep Erdoğan, a guy who's been welcomed in the White House, a guy who has had conversations with Donald Trump on the phone that led to the decimation of Kurdish populations the very next day, a guy that Trump obviously likes, has now reverted Hagia Sophia. This building, it reads, when you see it in English, it looks like Hagia Sophia, but the G is soft. So it's Hagia Sophia is now going to be a mosque. And Christians are going to continue to be persecuted, and Kurds are going to continue to be killed by this man who hates the Kurds because they are not Islamic extremists. He calls them mountain Turks. He speaks very abusively of the Kurds, and I think that he is responsible for the death of thousands and thousands and thousands of Kurds, both in Syria and in Turkey, and of course now, increasingly with bombing raids in northern Iraq. So it's a troubling situation, and it's one from which the American population is distracted as we deal with coronavirus and racism and other kinds of issues, economies and elections. But we need to pay attention to what's happening in the world, and what we need to know is that Recep Erdoğan, the president of Turkey, is taking Turkey in a strongly Islamist direction, anti-Israel, anti-West. A new empire is arising. This is very much what he speaks about. He will build new allegiances. He will build new alliances. He will be anti-Israel, anti-U.S., anti-Kurd, and anti-Western. What is this man doing at the head of Turkey? What is he doing in NATO? What is he doing as an American ally? There's a great deal of hypocrisy going on here. And because we are distracted, and by the way, even when we weren't distracted, our president didn't make wise decisions about that part of the world. There is something horrible happening in the Middle East. So I'm not a Turkey hater. In fact, I've said many times, sometimes even to the irritation of my Kurdish friends, I love Turkey. I love its history. I love being there. I love its food. I love its culture. I love its airports. I mean, I love all of it. I really, really love Turkey. But I despise the man who's in charge of Turkey right now. I despise what he's doing to that country. I despise the way he's intimidating Kurds. I despise the religiously bigoted direction he's taking it. And we had better pay attention. And the Trump foreign policy apparatus, which has been horribly in disarray, had better focus, because we may end up with a horrible military conflagration because of what Recep Erdoğan is doing in Turkey.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.